Good evening. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, July 14th. It is 6:31 p.m. and we are here for a special meeting of the trustees and to hear zoning case number 821 and from the Zoning Commission. And so the purpose of this hearing is so trustees may review and act upon a recommendation from the Zoning Commission about an application by property owner LSRM McIntyre Limited Partnership to reclassify a parcel into the residential planned unit development RPUD zoning classification. The parcel being considered for rezoning is parcel number B as in boy 030002003600000100. The parcel is located near the intersection of Kingsway Drive and Slater Court. This action will be considered a zoning map amendment. And then just number one, thank you all for being here. So we appreciate we don't usually get a big audience, so we appreciate you being here. Your voice matters, your opinions matter. We may agree, we may not always agree. Sometimes our decisions are based on what the Ohio Revised Code tells us we can do. We are a permissive government. We can only do what the code says we can do. We cannot create new rules, essentially, that are beyond the purview of a township. So just something to keep in mind as we walk through the process. What will happen, just to give a quick overview, if for those that may or may not have been to one of these before, there's a few of you who recognize your faces. We know you've been to several of these, so we'll be respectful of that. Alex or someone, I don't know if they're trying to come in or not, but they're welcome.
They're out. We have staff out there.
Okay, great. So the way this process works is we will hear comments from our staff. They will provide us kind of the background of why we're here, why you're here, what's happened so far in this case. We will open the podium and the microphone up to public comment. Those that would like to speak, we ask that, number one, you only speak when you're at the podium, and that you speak into the microphone clearly. We give 3 minutes, essentially, for public comment. And there will be a countdown clock so that you're aware, we're all aware. We're just trying to be respectful of everyone's time. We do ask that once we've heard the same comment 10 or 12 times, we ask you to just try to stay on topic if you can, just out of everyone's respect for everyone's time, and we understand the sensitivity. So we'll open that up to public comment. Those that can speak for or those that can speak against the proposed action. And then we'll close that public portion. The trustees and staff will talk amongst ourselves. During that period of time, we ask that, for no outbursts, no interjection, no yelling, no comments, no claps of applause if you're happy, no sobs if you're sad. But we'll work through that process. We'll have that discussion, and then we will determine how we proceed and how we vote for the evening. So that's our mission and our goal. We are all servants of the public at the end of the day, and so we serve every resident of Beavercreek Township, and so there are tens of thousands of you out there, and so we recognize that. So with that, I'll open it up to staff and Mr. Zaharia, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Amrine. What I'll tell you guys is that you have some true professionals. You may not always agree with them, but you have true professionals that work for the township. So you've got a township administrator who's a resident of the unincorporated portion of the township. You have Mr. Amrine, who has a legacy behind him, essentially, of public infrastructure projects, and we rely on his input, and we have since as long as I've been here. So Mr. McConnell comes to us with a plethora of education and background at the county level as well, and so we rely on these folks to give us recommendations. We don't always agree with them, they don't always agree with us, but that's why we're here. It's a public process. So Mr. Zaharia, if you want to tee it up and go from there.
I'll turn it over to staff report.
Okay.
Thank you, Board. So what I'd like to do is start by giving you the presentation, the information that was presented to the Zoning Commission originally. There will be some additional information that we present to you that kind of gives you a synopsis of how the different Zoning Commission hearings went and some new information that we've gathered in between. And then we'll give you our staff recommendation. So we prepared this PowerPoint to kind of make it a little bit easier to follow along for everybody. So just to kind of give you a sense of the case, as you've already said, this is a zoning map amendment. It's to rezone a parcel from A1 agricultural to residential plan unit development, or RPUD. This action is the first step in a lengthy process. If the rezoning is approved, the zoning commission would need to go back and approve any specific site plan in a subsequent public hearing. That would also make its way to the trustees as well. And then that needs to continue on through a county level subdivision process as well. So this is kind of the first step in the process. The question that we really need to answer tonight is this parcel suitable for the proposed land use, right? Is it suitable for residential dwellings? Other details of the site's configuration, its density, ingress and egress, where are the utilities going to be located, all those things are handled during the specific site plan approval process as it's laid out in the zoning resolution. As you said, the parcel ID is listed here, B03-000-200-3600-00100. It's 177.9 roughly acres of land that's proposed for rezoning. Interestingly, of that, 58.32 acres is to remain undeveloped. It is existing wetlands. There is a deal in place between the owner and the Beavercreek Wetlands Association that would leave that undeveloped. The current use is agricultural with some forested floodplain. The current zoning is A1 agricultural. There are some existing wetlands, as we mentioned. That sale is pending to the Beavercreek Wetlands Association, and there are existing floodplains on the western area of the parcel. We'll go into that a little bit further. So this is kind of a map of the parcel and the surrounding areas to give you a sense of where we are in the township. You'll notice that the parcel is surrounded by residential neighborhoods. The only area that isn't dense residential neighborhood, or I wouldn't call it dense, I would call it very clearly subdivided neighborhoods, is directly to the south, and that is more large lot agricultural, but it is still residential use. It is bordered on the west by Hunter's Ridge and Hunter's Point, on the north by Beaver Hills Estates and Hickory Hollows, on the east by the Spindletop subdivision of Stonehill Village, and on the south again by some larger lot agricultural residences. The developer included a letter of intent and some additional information in the application. And so this lists some of that information for your consideration. Again, the wetlands area is to be owned by the Beavercreek Wetlands Association and is included in this development as common open space. The Wetlands Association supported this proposed development strategy in comments during the Zoning Commission hearing, and also in a letter that was submitted in the packet. The developer estimates that 250 homes will be built in the proposed PUD. That's what was submitted to us in the application. This assumes a lot size of about a third of an acre, 0.3 acres. The applicant estimates about 650,000 square feet of new home floor area. These are all required data points that we take in when we get these applications. The applicant indicates that the site grading work would begin in September 2021. Now, I imagine that's been pushed out a couple of months because of this process taking longer than it typically does, with a development cycle of 7 years that would be done in multiple phases of development. The applicant has requested the permitted and conditional uses which mirror Article 5 of the Township zoning resolution, which is single-family residential. One additional permitted use is requested, and that is pedestrian recreation facilities. That's to encompass the use of the wetlands walking trails. There will be a connection to or at least a proposed connection to the Spotted Turtle Trail that's meant to connect most of the township. And so we wanted to make sure that that use was included. So this was a projected density comparison. What I did was we measured the number of homes in surrounding areas divided by the acreage in those neighborhoods. We found that, as you can see, there's a range of densities surrounding the proposed PUD. If the proposed PUD had the number of units that are suggested by the developer, its density would be 1.404. The neighborhood to the east directly, Spindletop's 1.64, Hunters Point and Hunters Ridge are both over 1.7, and the neighborhoods to the north are both below 0.5, as you can see. So there's a strong range of densities in the area, but this is important to just take into consideration of what's available in the area. This is the concept plan that was submitted by the developer. This is a very high-level plan. This is dream a dream kind of a map. It shows that the entrance and exit points would likely be Kingsway Drive and Fair Trail. It shows that no planned development in the floodplain area or in the wetlands area. But really this is a high-level concept. It is not meant to be scrutinized for any kind of engineering acumen. It is an idea right now. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but just wanted to give you a glimpse. So again, as I mentioned, the ingress and egress is expected both from Kingsway to the north, and then Fair Trail, which is to the east, coming out of Spindletop. There are 2 entrances required to any neighborhood per fire department regulations, and it will meet that requirement. The Greene County engineer has requested that a traffic impact study be conducted for the specific site plan approval process. Staff will require this. Staff already does require this as part of our zoning resolution. The applicant and staff have explored a possible Ankeny entrance, but we've determined that this is not feasible for a number of reasons, partly due to the owners of the property not being interested in that solution, also due to the engineer not being interested in that solution. So there are some utility challenges that need to be addressed. There's some overhead electric easements that run through the parcel. The developer needs to take these into account when he submits a specific site plan. There can be no buildings built underneath these easements. And in fact, there's a kind of a cone, if you will, underneath them that no buildings can be built under. The staff and the applicant both discussed with the Greene County sanitary engineer what sanitary sewer would be available, whether it would be sanitary or septic systems. We determined that a lift station would be required to get it onto sanitary sewer. We did confirm that that is a possibility, that is something that sanitary engineering will do. What it will likely result in is a maintenance fee levied on the users of that lift station. So likely the residents of the neighborhood would have a small maintenance fee included in their water utility bill. We also discussed that it would connect to water serving the Spindletop neighborhood. So there are some environmental details that we want to discuss. Excuse me. So the northwestern portion of the parcel contains wetlands area. This portion of the parcel is being sold to the Beavercreek Wetlands Association to be placed under conservation easement. It will not be developed, and it will be classified as common open space. It's meant to be a walking area, an area that not only members of, or residents of this neighborhood, but residents of the entire township can use as a natural resource. Again, they've provided a letter of support for this strategy. This strategy of kind of building near natural resources, but concentrating development away from them is sometimes known as cluster development or conservation development. Low impact development is another word for it. They've provided a letter of support for this strategy. The southwestern portion of the parcel is in the floodplain. The applicant has met with the county floodplain administrator, Al Kuzma, and understands the challenges of developing this portion of the parcel. It's our understanding that it is highly unlikely, next to impossible, that this portion of the parcel would be developed into residential homes. There is a duty to receive and discharge water on a parcel pre and post development at the same rate. What that functionally means is that you cannot truck in dirt to a site to fill in the floodplain to get it out of the floodplain. And it would be very difficult to, with the dirt on the site, to level it all out of the floodplain to develop that area. So that's why you saw the concept plan did not include that area. Staff will require extensive documentation of proper authorization for work in the floodplain should any specific site plan indicate development of this area. So let's say they come with a specific site plan and it indicates some sort of residence in that area. We would make sure to work very carefully with Al Kuzma to ensure that it was being done correctly, if at all. But staff recommends requiring any specific site plan to be reviewed and approved by the county floodplain administrator, regardless of whether or not whether it shows residences in the floodplain or not, just to make sure that the impact on the floodplain is as minimal as it can be. I'm not going to say no impact. I don't believe that's possible, but minimal impact is what we're looking for. The forested area along the north of the parcel may be a habitat for endangered species. Other endangered species may exist in the wetlands area, so we recommend that a specific site plan include an environmental impact study, which identifies any potential endangered species or their habitats. And so I wanted to also show you the floodplain map to give you an idea of kind of what we're talking about here. So basically,
Max, let me interrupt just one second.
sure.
Folks that are standing in the back, we do have empty chairs up front and in the second row and then even in the third row if you'd like to sit down. So, go ahead.
Thank you. So essentially, what you're looking at being developed is really this half of the parcel. There's potential that there could be some residences up here. There's definitely potential that it could be branched out here, although it's my understanding that perhaps the developer might be looking at doing some of his own residence down there. So it is certainly not the entire parcel that is scheduled for development because of the floodplain. So before I get into my recommendations, our staff recommendations, I want to give you some supplemental information, and then I'd also like to turn it over to our planner who's kind of got a little bit of information about low impact development for you. So this is some information about how it's progressed through the zoning commission. The original zoning commission hearing was on April 15th. It was continued because they could not reach a consensus. The hearing had progressed well into the evening and they asked to just go ahead and continue. They wanted to hear everybody. So the next hearing was on, May 6th. At that hearing, the zoning commission did formally close the public comments portion of the hearing and began to deliberate. Unfortunately, they were unable to craft a motion that enabled them to get a majority vote one way or the other. They split 2-2. Unfortunately, it was not communicated to them properly that that did not constitute a recommendation to the trustees. And so they needed to reconvene again on May 27th, at which point they did submit a recommendation, and that was to deny the application. The vote was 3-1. They recommended denial to the trustees. The most commonly cited concern during the zoning commission hearings was that the additional traffic impacts would be too great to bear by the existing neighborhoods, that the new neighborhood and the traffic it generated would create too much of a burden of traffic. So since the May 27th hearing, the Greene County engineer has provided a memo to staff in which he explains the controls that are in place to ensure that new subdivisions are engineered to support the traffic that they generate. That memo was included in the materials for this case, the trustees packet. Staff does continue to recommend that this application be approved, and I'll explain that a little bit more when I get into my formal recommendations. But before we get into that, I would like to turn it over to Ed very quickly, and he's going to talk a little bit about low-impact development.
Thanks, Max. I've attended the other hearings, all the other hearings on this case, and have basically stayed in the background. And I'm not here to talk about traffic or density or any of the other traditional factors that are considered when we look at a proposal for a subdivision. I will tell you that I was the one who took the first phone call from Beavercreek Wetlands Association about their Clean Ohio grant, and I was immediately excited by it for a number of reasons. I'm aware as an old planner that around this country, one of the solutions that has been developed for the preservation of wetlands and sensitive environmental areas is, well, the word low impact development, it's called a lot of things. Low impact development, or LID, you can Google it, you'll get thousands and thousands of hits, was actually first introduced as a tool in the toolbox to save the Chesapeake Bay. There was a man in Anne Arundel County, a planner, who came up with the notion that by concentrating development in the less sensitive areas of a region and concentrating infrastructure, construction, and any of the changes that are made by development in an area, you will contribute, you put less infrastructure in the ground and contribute to the preservation of the sensitive, most of the time wet, areas that are threatened by development. Well, Beavercreek Township has never entertained a proposal that used any of the tools from the low impact development toolbox. You'll find in some places that terms like cluster development or conservation development are used. They've been in use in this country for 30 years. And there are some that are available around us in Warren County, in Clinton County, and so forth. We can go see what these places look like. We can look at the spreadsheets that talk about not just the savings of the environment, but savings in costs to the developer. Less infrastructure is going into the ground if you're concentrating the homes in smaller spaces. So I got excited about this immediately. I was excited about the possibility of Beavercreek Township having what I consider to be a conservation development. And so this is really the first time that this township, at least in my nearly 10 years as a planner here, has had the opportunity to approve a development more than 1/3 of which, slightly less than 1/3 of which will be saved in a single piece as part of a wetland preservation action. And so 58 acres out of 177 in one piece. Now this is in addition to the other open space that there will necessarily be if this development moves forward. You can't build under a power line. You can't build within 15 feet of a power line. That's going to be open space. There will be detention. There will be retention ponds. There's going to be more open space than that 58 acres. But what that 58 acres represents to me, to this old planner, is an opportunity to step into a modern approach to wetland preservation. We have less and less and less land in this township all the time available for development that is not going to impact a wetland, a floodplain, a national scenic river, for goodness sakes. All of it impacts the national scenic river. So I think we've got to approach this from the standpoint. I'm here tonight as a conservationist before you, a conservationist planner. I think that what the Beavercreek Wetlands Association is attempting to do, believe me, this is an odd chair for them to be sitting in too, to be saying, we're in favor of this arrangement that includes development. Well, that's because it has a positive impact on sensitive area of the township. And so for that reason, and that reason primarily, I've been excited about this from the beginning. So I just want to point out one other thing, and this is a little sensitive, and you'll hear the word annexation thrown around. Let me begin by saying no one has threatened annexation. We're not preparing legal briefs and court cases and so forth. I'm not saying that that is an imminent threat here on this land within Beavercreek Township. I will tell you that the last 2 times that land has been annexed from the township into the city, it's been because of issues of filling the floodplain. Filling the floodplain is something the township won't allow. The city will. And it's as simple as that. And so when the township lost not just the 5 acres of the man's property who wanted to put fill in the floodplain, but 118 acres called Rotary Park, no longer in this building used to be in the township. It's not anymore, because public entities cannot fight annexation. And we were adjacent to the property that was being annexed. So there is something at stake here that ought to be a background thought, but we shouldn't forget that the township can lose here. Like I said, I'm going to let the other discussions about traffic and roadways and density and all of that to others. They're very well covered and very knowledgeable. It's the first time I saw the spreadsheet that Max showed about the actual density calculations, and I was pleasantly surprised at that. But I think that the final thing that I would like to point out, though, is about density, and that's that in articulating the number of 250 units on this property, there's no guarantee that 250 units can or will be built there. It's only a statutory maximum that allows the owner to proceed with plans for that should it be possible. It's not necessarily going to be approved at the site plan approval process. It's not necessarily going to be approved at the county process. It may not even be possible from a physical topography or engineering point of view. It's just that if you don't ask for what you want, our advice to any applicant, whether you're coming to us for a shed permit or someone's coming to us to develop 177 acres, our first piece of advice is always ask for what you really want. and then we'll step back from there when we get into the details and start talking with the devil. So, I'm going to shut up now. I think that the opportunity to, look, I just spent the last 2 months supervising a team of basically frogmen going underwater with chainsaws to clear log jams out of the Little Miami River. Those log jams happen for a lot of different reasons. They include more rain in this area than we've had historically. You can call it climate change if you want to. I'm not going there tonight. But it also includes development, because every impervious surface that's added to anywhere in the watershed adds to the volume and the velocity of the water that goes in the river. It's inevitable. You cannot argue that point. And so, now the rule of thumb among environmentalists is that when 10% of a watershed is developed, further development threatens the mainstream, the watershed, on a kind of one-to-one basis. You can mitigate up to 10. The Little Miami River watershed is developed now at a 12% level. We've exceeded that point where everything we do has an impact on the river. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves as we consider development to watershed, wetlands, and so forth is this acceptable? Is this acceptable impact to the river? Are we willing to lose the National Scenic River designation? We've been threatened before from our regional headquarters in Oklahoma City. If we don't take care of the river, we're going to lose the national designation. There's economic value to that. I'm not qualified to perform those calculations, but I do believe that there is value to having a state and national scenic river running down the spine of this township. So I just wanted to say these things because I believe that in all the conversation about traffic and density and so forth, the benefit to the Beavercreek Wetlands Association, the opportunity to preserve the Big Beaver Creek, this is Beavercreek Township, was getting lost. I didn't hear it talked about a lot. And so I kind of insisted to Alex today that I be given a few minutes to get on a soapbox about conservation concerns. Thanks for being patient with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed. I'll do anything yet, or?
Sorry?
Did you have other comments?
Yes, just very quickly, I'd like to give you our staff concerns, or our staff recommendations, rather. Okay, so first and foremost, our recommendation is to approve the rezoning of the parcel from A1 agricultural to R PUD, with the permitted conditional uses allowable in Article 5 of the zoning resolution, allowing that additional permitted use of pedestrian recreation facilities such as walking trails and any associated structures or improvements. We also recommend that you allow the 58-acre area, which is to be placed under conservation by the Beavercreek Wetlands Association, to be counted towards the open space requirements for the proposed PUD. We have a set of recommendations surrounding any specific site plan that might be submitted for this PUD. Number one, we would want to see proof of communication with the Greene County Floodplain Administrator and a detailed summary of techniques which will be employed when developing in or adjacent to the floodplain. Two, a traffic impact study and congestion mitigation strategies which have been approved by the Greene County engineer.
Max, is there a list of these in our packet?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. What page is that on? I know I've seen it, but it's 200.
Yeah.
I would have to, yeah, I would have to.
Okay. Alex, if you can follow that while he's working through. Go ahead.
Number 3 would be proof of communication with the holders of easements for overhead electric lines, noting how the
It's on
configuration
13 to 14.
of the neighborhood takes such easements into consideration. Such configuration shall be reviewed and approved by any agencies deemed applicable by the Community Development and Risk Department. Number 4, an environmental impact study determining the existence of any endangered species or their habitats on the parcel, and a detailed summary of techniques which will be employed when developing the site such that it conforms to all laws and regulations pertaining to the existence of said endangered species or habitats. And number 5, a detailed summary of site development techniques which will be employed to minimize impact on the wetlands and wooded areas on or near the parcel, to be reviewed and approved by any agencies deemed applicable by the Community Development and Risk Department. And finally, that any site plan submitted for this PUD is subject to the approval of any agency or entity with the jurisdiction or authority over any aspect of the proposed development, or to any other entity at the discretion of the Community Development and Risk Department. That last one usually refers to the county level subdivision process. It's something that we typically put in most of our zoning commission approvals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. This time, would the applicant like to speak, please? Yes, please, and name and address, please.
My name is Mark McIntyre, 1188 Whitetail Drive, Beavercreek, Ohio. Coming to you for just consideration to push this forward to be a development. I'm from Beavercreek. My dad was a Beavercreek High School graduate. Grew up on this farm, and we're really just looking to take it to the next stage. That was kind of always our plan. I have a very vested interest in this neighborhood. I intend to live in this neighborhood. I have a plethora of children in this school district, so I care about the impacts. They're very close to home. I intend to be driving through these neighborhoods, kids going to these schools. We've worked very closely with the wetlands for a number of decades now. So I do very much care what the impact is. And really, I'm hoping that we can work together and move forward with a good development.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone here from the Wetlands Association who would like to speak? Like to speak on behalf of the wetlands? Just your name and address, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Goldstein. I'm president of the Beavercreek Wetlands Association at the moment, and I'm at 2440 Beach Knoll Point in Dayton, not in Beavercreek. But I used to live in Beavercreek Township. Sorry, I left.
It's an open door.
Yeah, I'll just make a couple of quick comments. I will echo Ed's comment that it is, it might seem like a sort of a strange place for the Wetlands Association to be speaking in what seems to be an advocacy for development. That's not our position. We're not advocating for development. What we are supporting is the rezoning. And we believe that this rezoning, along with a well-considered development plan, can meet the interests of the landowner, the residents, the Wetlands Association, and the community. And we do believe that this piece of wetland and conserving it as an intact piece of land is of high value to the township, to the river, to the region. It's some really high-quality wetland on this property. We do not see this really as a benefit to our association. We see this as a benefit to the community. And as was mentioned before, the intention ultimately is to put walking paths through the wetland, part of this spotted turtle trail that will traverse the wetlands corridor from the north of Pearl's Fen down through here to Phillips Park in a way that will be accessible to local residents and anybody else who wants to use it. It will be a true community asset, which we as an organization with our partners will support to develop using our resources, so not costing the community to make that happen. So that's what we support, is development that allows this conservation project to remain intact. This is an amazing resource. I moved to Beavercreek Township in 1986 when this was all undeveloped, and I've seen what's happened. I mourn the loss of all the natural lands around here. What's left really needs to be conserved, so it's high priority. Thank you.
Just a quick question for you with regard to the recreation area, and so understand the conservation area and the preservation. How do you conserve and preserve when you have a parking lot with sheet drain and cars park there and they drain towards the wetland?
You know, the specific infrastructure that will support access to the wetlands is up for discussion. I don't think we necessarily require a parking lot. You know, there can be easy access from neighborhood streets just to sort of cul-de-sacs that end on the wetlands. Just if you look at Hunter's Ridge and Point, we've sort of developed some access points from the neighborhood into the wetlands so that people can just park, you know. And I will also say, as much as we think everybody should enjoy these wetlands, if you look at, you know, probably Siebenthaler Fen just around the corner is one of the most highly visited portions of this wetlands corridor. I was there today. I was the only car in the parking. These are not high traffic, you know, Disney parking areas. These are small numbers of people coming occasionally to enjoy the wetlands. So I don't think it's a high impact infrastructure issue, but the parking lot is, it might be in the plan that you've seen, but it's not, we did not put it there, and we don't require a parking lot from our own perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Mrs. Zahari, if you have anything else that you want to add at this time, we might get into some other details when we go into staff comments. Okay. All right, so at this time, folks, what I'll ask is that you bear with us, and I appreciate your patience as you've heard the comments so far, and appreciate that you've been respectful of the others that have spoken, and we will do the same for you, and we ask you to do the same for each other, so that we can all be, everyone can be heard this evening that wants to be heard. Just a housekeeping detail, so I'd like to put on the record that as part of the public portion of the hearing, the township has received a significant number of written comments for and against the application. There were comments to the zoning commission as well as to the board of trustees. All of those written comments have been provided to the trustees, and we've read those comments, and it's been extensive. We read those prior to this hearing, and they will be part of the record. They will not be read aloud this evening, and the reason is quite simple why. I can read very fast. Someone else might read very slow. And so when we get 3 minutes to speak, if someone writes a 13-page letter, there is no possible way I can read that in 3 minutes. And I can speak very quickly, but I can't do it, and I can't do that justice. So they will all be part of the written record. They'll be part of the minutes to this meeting, and they will be online for everyone to see. And so with that, I'd like to open the, I guess number one, is there anyone here, and I'm just going to take a wild guess, is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor of this project? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to those that would wish to oppose this. And so we actually just step up to the microphone. We've got a ticker up here that you can watch as far as there's no cane to reach over and pull you back, but we just ask you to be respectful of that. So give us your name, your address, and your 3 minutes. We appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Bob Nutter at 925 Hilltop Road in Beavercreek Township. I've lived in Beavercreek for about 67 years. So my concern is not for just Stonehill Village, which I am the developer, but the Beaver Hill neighbors to our north. I'm probably the only one in this room that was at the 1993 meeting where our Stonehill Village was approved. And that was when I ran across, or I should say, Mr. Ray McIntyre came in to visit. He had asked for additional access through Stonehill's property. And since this was the first time after having nearly 2 years of hearings that McIntyre had shown up, the trustees agreed to give us a few minutes in the back of the room to discuss this. The Nutters and the McIntyre family have been acquaintances for decades. Ray McIntyre acknowledged to us that because his ground was low, he didn't think that he would be able to use sewer. He also knew that he had a good entrance to the east on Ankeny Road, which I disagree with the engineers because I don't believe in the word camped. He stated that his farm entrance could probably be used as a entrance as well as the construction entrance. And then we also talked about density. And so he promised that he would limit his density to 100 units. And on that basis of that promise, we agreed on asking only that they put that in the minutes because that was going to be the only record of him saying something. So I'm not anti-development. I'm not on a developer versus developer kick. My only hope is the applicant can be a good neighbor and do what is right. My immediate concerns is the current sewer that we've run to Stonehill Village is not capable of handling any additional units on the basis of the planning. The applicant's Ankeny Farm Road entrance, the applicant has choked off that with many sales, several in the last few years, and now is expecting the surrounding established neighbors and neighborhoods to bear the inconvenience of a decade-long build-out. The applicant's farm equipment and associated trucks and trailers have used this entrance for decades. So I implore the trustees to request that this entrance be improved and used for a construction route for all development traffic, and would also suggest that it could be used as a main entrance should they decide to force the investment necessary to do that. I want to thank you for your consideration. I want to give a shout out to Beavercreek Township Fire Department, who does a lot for all of us. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Matt Davidson. I live at 1481 Huntland Court North in Spindletop. I'm also on the Stonehill Village Board of Directors. There's no new development of 250 homes that has as its only access small roads through neighborhoods of custom homes. And I ask that this proposal, if accepted, not be the first. Because of the wetlands and wires, 250 homes will need to be crammed against homes on Homestead and Huntland Court and Beaver Hills Estate. So the homes divided by acreage, the density calculation that you used doesn't really apply here because those homes are all crammed up against, as I said, Homestead, Huntland Court, and Beaver Hills Estates. There are many reasons the zoning commission meetings went the way they were and why the proposal was recommended for denial to the commissioners here. Traffic, drainage, sewer, water, wetland damage. We ask that you respect the decision of that commission. They did a lot of work. They listened to us all a lot, and they came up with what we thought was a good decision. Lastly, I ask that you drive through the neighborhoods and drive through Beaver Hills Estate, drive through Spindletop, take a look at it, take a look at Fair Trail, take a look at the Kingsway and the roads that come in from the other development, and take a look at those and say, will 250 homes in this development, in this proposed development, will 250 homes improve the quality of life for any of these Beavercreek Township residents? I just don't see it, so thank you for your time.
Sorry. You want to go now? All right. Yeah, I've got the mic. So, okay, well, for the trustees, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Jack Hudson. My wife, Marcia, and I have lived at 1488 Huntland Court North for about 12 years now in Stonehill Village. We're deeply concerned about the proposed development on the parcel in question due to the combined effects of potentially many additional homes on traffic in the nearby developments, traffic on the adjoining roads, school loading, and other factors. Without satisfactory exit points other than the stubs in Stonehill and Beaver Hills, the risk would dramatically increase to current residents as they drive, walk, and bike through our existing neighborhoods. People in the new development would be rushing to escape the existing parcel or the parcel in question, and to return home, speeding through existing neighborhoods. Traffic's already high in Trebine and Ankeny, especially with people who speed and pass on double yellows because they're in such a big hurry. The proposed development can make this situation worse, as it can for school loadings in an already stressed school system. We request that you carefully consider the combined effects of potential new development, especially with the increased risk of a large number of homes on the parcel in question. If you decide to allow development, a small number of homes there would still stress existing neighborhoods and infrastructure, but not to the level of a large number of homes. Thank you for listening.
Terry Sullivan. I live at 1695 West Slater Court. I'm right at the cusp of this congested area to get into this land. I've been there since 1978. 250 homes and 177 acres doesn't sound too hateful. But take out the room for the electric lines, or the cone under that, I like that term. The floodplain, not going to be developed at this time. 58 acres of wetlands, fine. You're not going to be putting any homes on that. This is all coming off of those 177 acres. But we're going to be having walking trails and possibly parking lot too. That's going to add to traffic going through this area. I think that, I'm calling it the wetlands deal, will, in general, I think I'm in favor of the wetlands, but I think this is a deal, but not for the people that live contiguous to that area. The other thing is this notion of a cluster plan. In other words, we've diminished the availability of 177 acres down to something considerably less than that, and now we're talking about clustering, which in my mind tells me increased density of the residences there to save on whatever you want to save on. But people are living in those homes, and people in the neighboring areas, like me, are living in those homes. So I don't see adding on to us what should have been the responsibility for the people that own this land. And I think it's not unreasonable at all to go from agricultural to residential. But what we've seen and what we've heard, and I know it's not a specific site development, but a lot of the problems that I see have been brought about by what hasn't been done by the owner of this property. In fact, I don't know how Mr. McIntyre plans on accessing his lot in this neighborhood. Is it going to be from Ankeny, or is it going to be from one of these other two areas? You're going to drive through the curvy, whatever it is up there, I don't even know what, Fair Trail? That's ridiculous. I think you guys all ought to drive through there. Or you can go down 22-foot wide Kingsway, and right before you run in the field, you can wave to me on the right as one of the 250 times 10 trips that they estimate. That's 2,500 a day, and then plus that up maybe with whatever little bit of additional traffic is required by wetlands visitors. Thanks.
Good evening, trustees, neighbors. I did want to echo one thing I heard earlier, and my name's Pete Garish. Sorry, I'm at 1545 Kingsway, and I'm across the street from Terry at the corner of Slater and Kingsway, so this has a pretty important impact on us, of course. I did want to echo that the Hunter's Ridge and the Hunter's Point density, that's not fair to use that as a comparison. We need to compare what's in our neighborhood, in the neighborhoods that are adjacent to us. That development, I think, is the density of that is somewhat inappropriate. One thing, Mr. Nutter had mentioned was about what took place in 1993, and I have some minutes here, and I'd just like to read a quick excerpt from that. The McIntyre family had hired a planner, an engineer from Wolpert Engineering during the development of Stonehill Village. And they said that there were some concerns about the layout of the property that would affect the future of the McIntyre property, and part of that was the stub roads. He said that their concern is vehicular access to the McIntyre property. He said the latest plan shows one 27-foot road, which is Stonehill Village, and they would have liked that road to have been developed to 30 feet, which they defined as the minimum collector road standards would be a 30-foot wide road to handle the density. At that time, the density of the McIntyre property was, as Mr. Nutter stated, was meant to be around 100 residential lots. That would account for approximately 1,000 trips a day, and they were at that time asking for a 30-foot wide collector road. They ended up with 27-foot wide in Stonehill Village, which obviously is less than what should be considered appropriate for ingress and egress into that neighborhood. Now, I live on Kingsway Drive. Kingsway Drive is 22 feet. And there's no sidewalks, there's no curbs, there's no street lights, and everyone in that neighborhood, lots of people in that neighborhood use that for ingress, egress, walking their dogs, exercise. It would be hazardous to bring that kind of traffic. They're proposing 2,500 trips a day down a 22-foot wide road. That I personally, and many of the people that I've talked to, we don't have a specific aversion to developing this property. It's how do we get people in and out of this property safely? That's it. I think it's really, really simple. We got to figure out how to access this neighborhood with some kind of road that is appropriate to handle whatever traffic, whether it's 100 homes, whether it's 250 homes. That's between 1,000 and 25 trips a day. We have, at this time, I think anybody in Kingsway could probably say 20 trips a day. It's going to completely jeopardize the health, safety, well-being of the people that live in this neighborhood. So, thank you. Appreciate your time.
My name's Tom Smith. I live in Prestonwood Court in Spindletop. I'm not directly affected yet by anything, but I do have one question. I was at both of the zoning board reviews, and the last one, they voted to deny the rezoning. Now, the gentleman over here on the end is recommending approval. From where are you speaking? I'd like to know why you recommend it, and the zoning board said no. They denied I don't know, maybe that wasn't official or whatever, but.
Number one, so we're not, this isn't a question and answer piece of the meeting.
Okay, well, I'm just bringing that up.
But to answer your
The zoning board
and to answer
denied
your
it,
question,
so.
the applicant can always appeal to the trustees
Okay,
for a different result.
well, is that where we are now then?
And then if staff makes the same recommendation they made, they can continue that recommendation, or they can change it.
Well, I guess I'm lost. Are you changing the minds of the zoning board, or is this an appeal from the zoning board
This is an appeal to the trustees.
to the trustees? Okay,
It's a recommendation.
so,
The zoning
staff
commission
makes a
provides a
recommendation.
recommendation to the Board of Township
okay.
Trustees.
What was his comment about recommending approval then?
He spent about 10 minutes to give us that dissertation, but we can cover that on, we can go through.
Well, I'm just curious about bureaucracy and how you're reacting to the very upset bunch of folks you've got around here in Beaver Hills, Hickory Hollow, Spindletop, and those that live along Ankeny Road, because none of us want any large development. We could go for the same kind of size lots of Hickory Hill, Beaver Hill, the 1 to 5 acre lots, septic systems and wells, and unfinished roads, no sidewalks or whatever. But if you come into Spindletop, we had to put in sidewalks. We had to have curbs and gutters. And then, of course, there were other things added by the planning. But still, that's a different quality of development. And if that's what you want, then the developer should start at that point and not start messing around with unfinished streets, sidewalks, lights, development, and so forth. Because all of that is part of it. And then going out to out to Fairgrounds or to Ankeny, we should have some kind of lighted areas all the way along the streets. If they're willing to do that, then maybe things might change a bit, but I still don't want you to overflow my sewer by bringing in pumped sewage. The fire department has already dug up the line from the new fire department house to Stonehill Village 3 times, I believe now, to correct engineering problems of the pump station or something. I don't know what it was. I didn't go over and bang on their heads to find out, but
Feel free to call me.
but they did a lot of dig up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There's a line former. It's not a meat counter, you can see.
Hey. Ken and Susan Richardson, we're at 1395 Huntland Court in Stonehill. I don't want to just beat a dead horse with the traffic and whatnot, but the planning gentleman made it sound like it was almost a Shangri-La that we can't afford to not have. And everybody in this room probably would say, yeah, let's go for a Shangri-La. But if you build a bubble around it and there's no way to get into it, it's ineffective. I would also echo a comment. You folks need to drive.
Excuse me, folks, if we can, sir, if we can hear you, we can hear you on the microphone, so it just, in respect to the gentleman speaking.
Thank
you. Alex, you can just add a few seconds for me. Thank you.
I would really ask that each of you drive the streets, especially in Stonehill. My back of the house borders on Turfland Boulevard, and so I go out that way whenever I exit the subdivision, and cars park on both sides of the street, and you have to go about 5-10 miles an hour to get through there. If there happens to be a big truck for people doing yard work, it's scary driving through there. I pity the fire department personnel that would ever respond to an emergency and have to come blasting through Turfland Boulevard, turning left on to Fairtrail. There is no way that you can do that safely with the traffic situation in the street as they're currently developed. There's just no way. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Robert Cunin. I'm at 1544 Stormy Court. I'm delighted to hear that you have everything that we've submitted in writing already, which is good. I thought we had 2 minutes to speak, so I was going to say 2 things. Since we get 3, I'm going to say 3 things. First, I'd like to pass kudos to the zoning commissioners who have studied this and listened, and we appreciate that. Second, a subset of the residents that are here did meet with the Beavercreek Wetlands Association, and I'd like to echo what Dave said. We are all in agreement that the developer's intent is the problem here. The Beavercreek Wetlands Association and the residents all agree density is the issue. And Mr. Nutter's comments, I think the zoning commissioners did go back in the history and did learn that there have been a series of trade-offs which have caused a problem here with this case and this parcel. And the last thing I'd like to say is we've entrusted you as trustees on our behalf. You are the township, we are the township, and we count on you supporting township residents in all the concerns that we've provided. Thank you.
Amy Albert, 1225 Ankeny Road. I did submit a statement. I just hope that you guys did read that because that does kind of clarify quite a few things. I'm glad to hear that, Mark, that you do care deeply about. I tend to be very loud, so I'm glad to hear that you do care about the intent of how this is going to be developed, because I think that that's really the crux of the issue, is no one's real sure about where you're standing on this, because the applicant, as I noted in my statement, my husband and I are against as it stands now for the reasons that I stated. In your application, you indicated a win-win-win solution, a win for the township, a win for the wetlands, and a win for you. But there was nothing about us. In my statement, what I did suggest and what my husband do acknowledge is that it's important that we all work together, that a true compromise is something in which we all get a little of what we want, maybe not everything. If the development does get restricted and rezoned in a responsible way in which development can occur, the sale to the wetlands can happen, which, by the way, does not have to be solely due to this application. You can still do that independently. But it would be a win-win for the township. You would get the wetlands, you would also get the income generated by development. You would win, Mark, because you're going to be able to develop it then. And as residents, we then would win because we would have lower densities. And that is really, I think, the biggest issue, because all of the access points, whether it's Stonehill, Kingsway, or Ankeny, as you know, at 16 feet, 22, 27, none of them are feasible for 250 homes. It's just not suitable. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Craven, 1231 Homestead Drive. My wife and myself have been living on Homestead for the last 10 years. We've been looking at the traffic and the water flows. Out of the pond that we have on Stonehill, you have a wetland that goes through the middle of the property that I don't believe is shown as a wetland. So you have the creek that runs through the middle of the property from the east to the west down to the wetlands. You also have the road. As mentioned, you have parking on both sides of turf land and on both sides of fair trails. And so as vehicles come through, if they're parked on both sides, you have to slalom through the road to get to wherever you're going. So as we're coming home, we have to slalom on turf land to get back to fair trails, or we have to slalom on fair trails to get back onto Homestead. I think it's also been mentioned a little bit, you got the power lines, you've mentioned that. The power lines go through the middle of the property. And so you have that concern when they're building the houses. So are you going to, cut that out of the middle of the property? I believe the gentleman, Tom, had mentioned that. And then as you go through the density, he had mentioned the home sites were going to be 0.3 acres. So if you take 0.3, divide that by 1 or into 1, you get a density of a little over 3.1 or 3.3 properties per acre, not the 1.4, I believe the gentleman was showing when he was including all the property to include the wetlands. And I believe the wetlands could be sold as a separate entity and not part of this deal, and not have to be a consideration in there. Appreciate your time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Johnson, and I live at 1276 Scottsgate Court South in the Spindletop section of Stonehill Village. Scottsgate Court South is the only entrance from Ankeny Road into Spindletop of Stonehill Village, and it is already, in my opinion, too small for the amount of traffic in Spindletop of Stonehill Village. I recently had my vehicle legally parked on the street there, and someone hit my vehicle to the extent that it was almost the entire value of the vehicle. And it was during the day. The person was not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I do not think that adding more traffic to the roads is appropriate because they are already too trafficky for the number of people who currently live in the area. And from what I understand, There are other classifications other than RPUD that could be explored for the proposed land development, such as R-1AA. And I think as an RPUD, we should probably not approve the application. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Evening. My name is Frank Staubel. I live at 1565 Kingsway Drive in Beaver Hills. I just want to bring up one thing. I believe you need to understand that the development is unique in that this is the first time, according to the zoning office, that Beavercreek Township has ever had a development where all of the traffic has to pass through existing neighborhoods rather than go through feeder streets. That generates, 2,500 cars, creates a safety problem. Kingsway Drive, by the way, also has not had any improvements since 1993 other than periodic resurfacing. So it's still 22 feet, just like it was about 28 years ago, and we're facing the same problems now. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Thank you.
My name is Janet Huntsman, and I have lived at 1560 Kingsway Drive for the past 43 years. There is good evidence to point out that this future development requires a low density. Supporting evidence comes from our recent Zoning Commission's deliberations from the May 27th hearing, where the 1993 meeting minutes of the rezoning hearing for Stonehill Village were referenced. An excerpt from these minutes was read, where, in referring to any future development of the McIntyre parcel, that the roads of Kingsway Drive and Fairtrail would be inadequate and could pose a serious problem. It further stated that the McIntyre's parcel had the potential for up to 100 homes. This is irregardless of the type of utilities, as traffic is a result of the number of homes, not whether you have a well or county water. Also, in the May 27th hearing, the Zoning Commission brought up the fact that Kingsway Drive would bear the largest load of traffic, as it is a straight access to the parcel. The proposed development, therefore, would need to match Beaver Hills' 0.4 density for the number of new homes. That is 0.4 times 178 acres equals 71 homes. Note that in the past years, 2 different zoning commissions concluded that the McIntyre parcel, if developed, should be built with no more than 100 homes. Additional evidence comes from a resident who, at our first hearing of April 15th, said that she was told in August 2019 to drop her variance request because it would generate too much traffic, despite the fact that her business was only 10 employees and they did not even report to her home for work. This was in the Beaver Hills estate. To summarize, you cannot separate density, the number of homes, and traffic, as they are all interrelated. The only way to ensure a low density is to request that the applicant reapply for a single residential district, R1AA, where the smallest lot is 1 acre. I'm going back to the beginning. In the first staff report, it states that the only question the residents were to ask was, is this parcel suitable for new home construction? To answer and to clarify that question, part of the land is suitable for new home construction, but not the parcel as a whole. Because of the unique situation of the 2 access roads to be used, Kingsway Drive and Fairtrail West, run through the center of 2 established neighborhoods in order to service the parcel. Also, the rezoning change request from agricultural to an RPUD, not agricultural to residential. And Article 17.069 states that there are 10 criteria that must be met for a PUD zoning approval. So limiting residents to only 1 question about suitability is unrealistic. And I'm done.
So my name is Jeff Fath. My wife Bridget and I live at 1485 Huntland Court North. We live roughly 135 feet just to the east of this parcel. I want to follow up the other lady from on Ankeny who mentioned in the applicant's application, they stated a win-win-win, but does fail to consider any impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods and the residents that live there. They claim that this is going to benefit everybody. But if it does benefit, then why did the McIntyres sell 4 personal residents that surround this proposed PUD? They knew of their intentions. They didn't want to decrease their property value, so not Mark, but his siblings sold their properties before this became public knowledge. In doing so, they also sold off any direct access to Ankeny Road, so they shot themselves in the foot. So I urge the trustees to disapprove the application as it's been submitted. This is supposed to be, I think, a 2-step process. First step in paragraph or section 17.06.3 of the township resolution package. They have failed to meet all the criteria as specified. So to me, the application's incomplete and can't even be approved as is. This really will affect the neighborhoods of Spindletop, as well as Hickory Hollows and Beaver Hills Estates. They need to have access to a public thoroughfare. And by thoroughfare, I'm thinking fairgrounds, Treybine, or Ankeny, not through Stonehill Village, on Fair Trail, on the other streets, or Kingsway through Beaver Hills. To me, the family also set a precedent for minimum 1-acre lots, because the original farm, they deeded off properties to the south for personal residences. Those were all minimum of 1-acre lots. They created 2 lots to the north off the farm. Those were 5-acre lots. So to me, they've already set the precedence for a minimum of a 1-acre lot in this parcel, and that'd be consistent with Beaver Hills Estates to the north. As other people have mentioned, we're concerned about the traffic, pollution, actually the runoff impact to the wetlands and to the river. So I urge you guys to really consider the application as it's been submitted. It doesn't meet the criteria that's actually in the zoning township, or in the Beavercreek Township zoning document. And if it's not too late, I did write a letter. Can I submit one, or is it past a cutoff to give you a letter?
You can take it to the administrator and we'll pass it down. Is there anything materially different in your letter than what you?
Oh, there's a lot more detail in there. I summarized it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak, even if it's just a general comment?
Good evening. I'm Charlotte DeLong, 1566 Tamara Trail. It goes from Treybine down to Kingsway. I apologize. I came from a very nasty working day. One thing that has not been mentioned, I am the one that got recommended to deny the barn because of traffic from employees that don't come to my home. We have less than 10 employees, so her statement is actually very true. But one thing that has not been discussed here is the flooding issue. I'm lucky enough to be on a hill, but after the last rain that we've had, and agree it's really been weird this year, we decided to drive down to Kingsway to see how bad the Kingsway traffic was and how the flooding was. You couldn't walk through it. I understand it's different this year, but I have talked to numerous people over in Hunters Creek and the other developments that are around. Flooding is already an issue. If we go ahead and we develop more property to the density that we're talking about, and I know density is not the issue at this point, but any more development in that low land is going to be a flood problem. It's already flooding, the wetlands can't handle it, and it's not going to get any better by adding more homes. We're not afraid of development. We understand development is going to happen. But there is a chance for us to compromise, to come up with a way that we can make this to where it's not hurting the current residents, where we're not flooded out of our homes. I almost got hit by a FedEx truck just by getting my mail. I mean, this is going to continue to get worse, but we've got to do it in a smart way. There's got to be a way to do this to where all of us can live in harmony. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Come on up. You gotta beat her.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Lisa Hughes. I live at 1586 Tamara Trail with my husband, Don. And tonight, I would just like to say that I agree with all the sentiments that I've heard. It is a huge concern. We moved into this area 7-8 years ago because of the open yards and the safety of walking in the street and taking our grandkids in the strollers and walking them out. Walking our dogs. There's a huge concern about the number of vehicles coming through the neighborhood. I think we're not, as they all said, not opposed to a future development, but let's submit an application that gives us a sense of place to start and not add a 250 home, because that's really our huge concern. So if we submit an application that shows some reasonable boundaries to begin the discussion, I think that would give everybody in the room a better sense of relief of here's where we're starting and here's the guidelines on what this property will initially encompass. Also, there was, I know, discussion of rezoning it to an RPUD. Really need it to be rezoned to the R1AA, and that the 1 acre lots are given consideration, because that's the beauty of the surrounding neighborhoods, is the size of our lots. And going into another neighborhood that would have smaller lots, to me, it just takes away some of the beauty of the community of where we're at. And one of the reasons we came into the township to begin originally. So I thank you for your time tonight. I do hope that we can come to a consensus. I do hope that Mr. McIntyre is sincere on where he's hoping to go with this project and on behalf of our community. And again, our hope rests with you too, that you would look at disapproving this application and having a new one submitted. Thank you.
Do you want to speak, sir? You can come on up.
Name is Larry Linder. I live up on Tamara Trail and been a resident of Beavercreek for 65 years. And I can remember as a young man, we used to live in the east end of Dayton, and on a hot summer night, we used to that was before air conditioning, we used to take a ride out to Beavercreek to cool off. That was a long way through Linden Avenue over.
It's heated up since.
So, anyway, we used to run a trap line through the creek that is now the Beaver Creek Mall. But anyway, the point of it is the density is wrong, because you have a thermal density problem, and as you pave more roads, you put more houses in, all of a sudden you've recreated what we spent time and money to escape. You know, we hated the city of Dayton because of the summer environment, and now you're trying to recreate the same crap in Beavercreek, in the township, and we have spent a lot of time and money to escape that. And the people out here, everybody maintains their properties, and over the years I've planted 160 trees plus a couple hundred that Mother Nature has planted. But we maintain the environment for the way it used to be, and the way we like it. And we don't want a high-density housing next door, plain and simple. You know, if you recreate, and this is a message to McIntyre, if you go ahead and redevelop it as estate-size property, you'll end up making more money than you will building a whole bunch of Vinylville houses. Anyway, end of statement.
Thank you. Any other comments? Last chance.
Going.
Okay, we'll close the public comment section. Appreciate all your comments. We hear them, and we understand them. Some of your comments, we conflict with why we're here tonight. So some of those are specific site plan, preliminary site plan conversations. Some of those, this board and any zoning commission also has to avoid just from a discrimination standpoint. We cannot stipulate building materials. We cannot stipulate price points of homes. There are fair housing laws that prevent that. And so that's why we don't stipulate vinyl versus cedar versus brick. That's why we don't stipulate price points. So those conversations we simply cannot have at this board. And so at this point, I guess I'll open it up to the board and to staff and any questions that we have and any discussion we have betweenst us, or any other questions we have for the applicant, for the wetlands, for fire. There's erosions here as well from a fire prevention standpoint, if we have any questions. This is really not we've talked about this, the zoning commission talked about it. It's not a matter of, we're not approving 500 homes, 400 homes, 250 homes, 100 homes. We're not approving that tonight. What we're being asked to revisit essentially is, should it be considered to go from agriculture to RPUD? And so Max or Alex or both of you, why a PUD? Why not R1? So number one, I know the applicant's not obligated to even go through the PUD process.
Correct.
The township there's benefits, believe it or not, folks, there are benefits to the applicant agreeing to go through a PUD. So, but what's the advantage and disadvantage from a township perspective of RPUD versus R1AA?
The major advantage to the township for the PUD process is that we require the specific site plan approval. Normal residential zoning, like for instance, just R1AA zoning. Once it is zoned R1AA, somebody can come in and apply for a house permit, and that's it. If it meets all the other criteria of the zoning resolution, setbacks and height and all those things, we must approve that home. That's it. With PUD zoning, we at least get a crack at approving the specific site plan that comes before the zoning commission and the trustees. PUDs represent flexibility both for the township and for the developers. So there are, as Mr. Krutz pointed out, some extreme advantages to the township for this PUD zoning, and the real reason why it's RPUD versus anything else is because that's what the applicant applied for. We do not force the applicant to apply for any specific zoning designation. He could have applied for R1, he could have applied for R4, super dense multifamily housing, if he chose to apply for that, but he did not. He chose to apply for single family residential plan unit development. So I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Amrine or Mr. Zaharieff, why is Fair Trail Road stubbed and not a cul-de-sac?
Well, we have quite a few stub roads in the township that are intent for future growth. We have one in Hunters Point, we have Stonehill, we have Stubb Street, obviously, and Beaver Hills Estate. And if part of the PUD process or preferred part A development, if we would determine that there would be no future growth and they would submit a site plan, we would say it needs to be cul-de-sac, not just a straight dead end. So, for example, in my neighborhood, there's farmland behind me. I mean, it was before I worked for the township. I've lived in the township for over 40 years. I went to the township, at the time it was county, doing our zoning, and I asked, what does this Stubb Street go to? And they said it will be going to future development. So that's why it's their stub. And then I can't speak to what the zoning commission or the trustees did in 1993 or what the county required, you know, for a stub street, but I think the intent of everything that I've seen is that it would lead to future development.
I would point out simply that the township comprehensive land use plan calls this land out for residential development as well. So the stubbing of those streets was consistent with that comp plan in anticipating future development.
Another question as far as the comments to the minutes from the 90s, or whenever they were from, relative to the 100 lot commitment from the McIntyre farm or McIntyre family or individuals of the McIntyre family at that time. Were those conditions to the approval, or were they discussion that occurred during the hearing? Because there's a significant difference. If they were conditions of approval, then they need to be upheld. We can talk about anything and everything in this meeting, but it doesn't become part of the condition of an approval. It's a part of the minutes of what was discussed, and at that point it's really up to whoever's taking those minutes to include or exclude those comments. And historically the township has been better than others as far as taking minutes. So my question is, was it a condition of the approval or not?
It was not. It was part of the discussion portion of the case.
Okay. So, and then then the second tag along to that is that oftentimes we put things in the minutes so that future generations can understand the methodology or the what we worked through and thought through in the process we went to make a conclude a decision. So based on, if you read not just that sentence of the minutes, if you read the minutes in their entirety, what do we conclude as far as, was that a condition precedent to that board's decision to approve, to make their decisions that night?
In my opinion, in the context of the minutes, it was discussed as part of an objection to the development of Stonehill Village by the McIntyres. It was comments from an engineer employed by Mr. McIntyre's father, who was attempting to have Fairtrail Way widened in anticipation of future development of the McIntyre property. And that was all it was. In my recollection, it did not appear to go beyond that in terms of being a factor in the decision-making process of the board when it came to approving or not the Spindletop development.
So was Fairtrail's, the width of Fairtrail, was it approved based on 100 homes or more, 100 homes or less, or none of the above?
It was not approved based on any, as far as I know, and again, this was from 1993, but it was not approved based on any number of homes in the McIntyre parcel.
Then why was it in the minutes?
Because again, it was something that was brought up during the public comments portion of the hearing.
Okay.
If it was going to be part of any decision-making, I would assume at the time that council, whoever was representing the township at the time, would say you would need to put that in the actual legislation, the resolution that the Board of Township Trustees. So to go back to a previous comment and statement, the Zoning Commission makes recommendations. They are not a legal body. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a legal body. The only place for the Board of Zoning Appeals to be appealed to, not to the Township Trustees, is to Greene County Common Pleas Court. The legal authority is where we're at today. So when the board in 93 would have made any conditions, they would have need to put those conditions in there to make it a legal action from the township. So the minutes reflect of what was discussed. The minutes reflect of what kind of the intent was going, but the actual resolution that is passed is the legislation that is moving forward on what dictates the development and any action that we do as resolutions.
Mr. McIntyre, if we put a condition on the approval that you had to build no more than 100 homes, would you continue with the project?
I don't know, I'd have to take that into consideration. I mean, it may end up being 100 homes. I think we have a lot of information to gather before we make that call.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question for the applicant. Can you get on the record, please? Mr. McIntyre, based on this application, as you can see, the neighbors around are pretty specific about two main areas that we've heard tonight. One is the density, and second is the egress and ingress of the future development. With a PUD, we would allow development of a residential, but we would require a specific site plan that would give us pertinent details of every aspect of your development. Would you consider, on the record, lowering the density and looking at another egress?
We have explored other egress as we continue to do so. Like staff has mentioned, we had to put a number on an application to get it through. 250 may be, that's the high end. That's the thing we have to ask for. But fully expect that through the process of getting our application through zoning from a PUD perspective, that we will be having traffic studies, environmental studies, and all these other impact studies to consider what that density really should be, with the expectation that we're going to come back to this board and you folks here to give us a thumbs up or thumbs down.
What I'm only, I understand what you just stated, but I still need to have, you've got a whole population here that is vehement, I would say, against this development based on the density. And I think we need to hear a little bit more from you on that density issue before I can vote clearly to represent the citizens here. I think that's a major contingency at this point for me. And I'd just like to see if you're a little bit more flexible than what you just stated.
We can certainly discuss it. I mean, I think, again, we threw out a number based on kind of the max without any information as far as, studies. Now, we had talked to the engineers, we had talked to the folks about traffic to understand, is this even feasible? What would this look like? What process would we have to go through? What studies would we have to do to get to that? So it's kind of hard for me to say yes or no. I suspect it will most likely be less than 250 homes. But to say what that number is based on no information is kind of hard for me to commit to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. I'm sorry. If we stated that you have to find another access point other than the two neighborhoods, would you continue with the application?
We are still going to continue to pursue those other avenues as we have continued to do so. We're still having discussions. We're still having reviews to see what we can acquire, what we cannot. Unfortunately, I did not own that property that has the certain access off of Ankeny Road for me to even make that call. So it wasn't my doing to lose that access. That being said, we do have some level of easement across that property, but there are other restrictions of other properties that we have to go through as well that we are trying to work through. So still going through it, still working through it.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one that might affect the wetlands. I just wanted to know what other ways that you would preserve the wetlands from the housing development, and any obviously trash is gonna from neighborhoods blow into the areas, and just that type of thing. Like, what other ways do you anticipate preserving those wetland areas?
If you can come up to the microphone.
Yeah.
You can have a seat, Mr. Baker. Thank you.
The Beavercreek Wetlands Association is largely a volunteer-run organization, so we are constantly working, those of us who are on the board and small number of employees, and then lots of volunteers, to do everything it takes to keep high-quality wetlands intact, and that's everything from building board and maintaining boardwalks and observation platforms to managing invasive species and removing trash and all these things. We've just, the last few days, been repairing railings along the walk at Siebenthaler Fen, and that kind of work is just ongoing all the time. The Wetlands Association does not, would own this property. We don't own most of the property through the corridor of the wetlands, so we work with our partners, Greene County Parks and Trails and townships and ODNR, and to coordinate efforts, Greene County Sanitary Engineering, all these, to coordinate efforts to maintain healthy, clean, safe environments. So we're committed to the work, but it's a matter of just coordinating efforts.
Thank you. A couple of the questions. Max, you made the comment that the houses effectively could not be built in the floodplain. But if this property is annexed to the city of Beavercreek, the city of Beavercreek has its own floodplain administrator. City of Beavercreek could approve that they fill in the floodplain, and they could build then up to 465 homes on the property. And so has that been discussed at all at the zoning commission level? Was that brought up or not?
The possibility of annexation was brought up. The kind of calculations done so what we did was we took a similarly annexed area and we gave that density, one that had the floodplain filled in by the city. We extrapolated that density over the 178 acres of this parcel to get the number of homes that could potentially be on this parcel. That information was not given to the zoning commission. At that time, we did not anticipate the need for that kind of information.
Okay. Ms. Frick, if the applicant were to come back and request R1 AA, so at that point, does the township have the discretion to stipulate density?
No, because that's already, it goes back to the prior question of why PUD versus the R1AA is when you go into zoning a PUD, the resolution to approve, if it's approved, becomes legislation itself. So it is effectively the zoning code for that area, that parcel. Just as if you were in R1AA, you would look at the zoning code that's in place. So the density is already dictated by the Beavercreek Township zoning code for R1AA.
And what is it?
The top of my head.
It's that all lots must be at least 1 acre in size.
So with a PUD, then you can legislate that arguably, or it can be done at the specific site plan level, which is normally where you would consider the actual density. Because then you'll have an actual plan, you'll have the information that you need.
It'll be legislated that those parcels are all 1 acre. Only.
Mr. Zahari, so regardless of the board's decision this evening, if the board upheld the zoning commission and denied the request, or if the board chose a different path and voted to approve the request, in either case, whether we denied it or whether we approved it, is there anything that would preclude the applicant from, if they did not get what they wanted during the specific site plan or preliminary site plan, during that site plan approval process, is there anything that would preclude them from withdrawing their application and annexing to the city of Beavercreek?
So, if the property that is being sold to the wetlands is being considered as part of the PUD, then the wetlands has an agreement with Beavercreek Township that they will not annex any current land or future land to any municipality. So, if it is denied, the sale of the property, from what I understand, has not taken place between Mr. McIntyre and the Beavercreek Wetlands Association. Then that entire parcel could end up in the city of Beavercreek. They could annex to the city of Beavercreek. Now, there has been questions to me, I received tons of phone calls over this case, is, well, how is the city of Beavercreek going to build a bridge over the Beaver Creek from Hunter's Ridge, which is in the city of Beavercreek, to get to the McIntyre property? And they don't have to. They can annex all the government-owned land, including the land behind my house or in my neighborhood, which is owned by Beavercreek Township, which already has trails and a preserve on it with the Beavercreek Wetlands Association. They can annex to the city of Beavercreek, and they can attach to the 2 existing public roads without our permission. If it goes to the city of Beavercreek, we as a township, you as residents, me as a resident, we have no say or control over what goes on in that neighborhood. Okay? So for example, if the development, we have a development in south part of Beavercreek. A contractor destroyed our road going into the development. Okay? Someone building a house, put heavy equipment on our road, destroyed it, did a lot of damage to it. We issued a.
When you say we and our, it's not yours personally, it's the township.
We, the township.
It's a
yeah,
township road.
Yeah, township road. The township came in and issued a cease and desist order on the house, on whoever was building the house, until they fixed the road that they damaged. If it goes to the city of Beavercreek, or city of Fairborn, or city of Xenia, or city of Kettering, of all the recent annexation cases, we have no control over that. We cannot issue a cease and desist order in another community to tell them to fix our roads. It becomes, at that point, a civil matter.
How would the city of Beavercreek provide services to that neighborhood, being that it?
Same that they do now. It's just provide, same as Hunter's
So
Ridge.
as far as
was
access,
annexed.
you'd have snowplows driving
Yeah.
through Fairfield.
You would have.
Or Kingsway to get to the
Correct.
city of Beavercreek.
And there
City of
are,
Beavercreek.
that goes on every snowstorm. And now, the good news is,
That
at the
is
staff
really
level, city of Beavercreek, staff and township staff and county staff, we don't play jurisdictional wars, if you will, and lift up plows and put it back down. So our guys don't lift up the plows when we hit city roads. We continue to plow as we go through to get back into township roads. City of Beavercreek does the same thing. Greene County does the same thing. There are other jurisdictions within this county that takes place. Where
Why do cities annex township properties? General reason is taxes.
they need more tax base. They want the tax base. And and City of Beavercreek doesn't have an income tax, but most others are, it's income tax based. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and there's a long history of annexation cases that the township has fought and lost, both in federal court, common pleas court, Second District Court of Appeals, and most of them are related to density. With the town, where the township trustees have said no.
Nathaniel's Grove is one.
Yeah, Nathaniel's Grove was a federal court case. That was a little
Nathaniel's
bit.
Grove is on Beaver Valley Road, at the part of the Siemens-Dollar property.
Nathaniel's Grove, it's not an annexation case, it was a federal court case. So the developer took us to federal court, once we denied the zoning, the rezoning. Went to federal court, they issued not only the rezoning, they issued the density and the site plan. So it takes the control out of the township and the county engineer's office and sanitary engineering. So when we're dealing with the federal consent decree, what the judge says is the way it has to be. Now, we have agreed with the developer to fix some things that affect traffic, affect stormwater, and affect the Beavercreek wetlands. But we had to go back to federal court in front of the federal magistrate with a joint, our attorney and their attorney agreeing to make these changes. That doesn't guarantee the court's gonna say, okay. The court could say, we already ruled on this, this is the way it's gonna be. So that federal court case was Nathaniel's Grove, which is 475 homes, which the township said no to. It also includes Spring Ridge, which Spring Ridge was about 130 some homes, and Spring Meadows was 136 homes. All three of those developments were taken as one legal action against the township.
All right, so, Ms. Frick, is there anything that we're, as far as guidance that you can provide? I understand we're not here to set density, we're not here to talk about traffic impact, we're not here to talk about price point impact, price erosion to neighboring properties, siding versus brick. We're not here to talk about that. And so we're purely here to say, is this land suitable for residential development? And do we want to tackle it through a PUD process, through an R1AA process, if the applicant were even agreeable? Or are we willing to roll the dice and have it go to the city?
I mean, I would just say to remember that you do have, because it is a PUD process, you do have some control, even at the zoning level though, too. I mean, the staff has made recommendations for conditions on the zoning that to provide at the next step, the next level of site plan, that some of those things that are the concerns of the citizen have to be addressed. The traffic study, traffic impact studies, the environmental impact studies, those things, so they have to be. So if you legislate that
Right, but
as conditions.
it's missing the one thing, which is density. There's no condition, there's no recommended condition regarding density.
But we can add that to
And
a site
the
plan.
number one concern is, if I understand correctly, everyone would be happy with a 100-bed nursing home, but not with 100 homes. Or 150-bed nursing home would be just fine, but not 150 homes, or not 175 homes.
Well, we don't, so here's, and this goes back to what staff
And then
said.
the real question also becomes, where does one man's rights end, and where do everyone else's rights begin? So there are landowner rights.
So what we also need to consider is we don't know. So yes, it is the max of 250. If an impact study comes back, traffic impact study, or an environmental comes back, it could be 10 homes. We don't know without, and that's the part of the PUD process, is that we're able to control those things. If it goes to the city of Beavercreek, there's no requirement to do a traffic impact study on Fairgrounds Road or Trayvine Road, because those are township roads. We cannot compel another jurisdiction to take a look at the roads that the residents are looking at, that go into the development. And the county engineer put that, in her memo to you, is that traditionally, other jurisdictions don't work with the county engineer who represents the township in regards to engineering, works with us on impact studies, storm sewer, drainage issues. Those are all things that if it does go to another jurisdiction, is totally out of our hands. And it's unfortunate, because if, for example, there's a flooding issue from one house that is in, let's say, the city of Beavercreek, or city of Fairborn, or city of Xenia, or city of Kettering, and it backs up to a township property, right then it becomes a civil matter. They're gonna have to sue each other.
Right, we've already got that
Yeah,
across the
and
street.
we had that across the street from where we're sitting today.
We have two families that did not get along, and the one family annexed to the city, and now the other family that's left in the township has no recourse but to
And
sue.
they can't use their backyard. And they call and ask for help from the township, and there's nothing we can do. It's a civil matter. If both properties are in the city of, or Beavercreek Township, we have jurisdiction. We have, and we deal with this a lot, because some of the developments were built in the 70s. Some of the developments were not designed for today's rain and average rainfall.
Right, we drove bigger cars then too.
Exactly.
We drove different vehicles,
So-
different things like that.
So you can, in regards to the PUD process, we don't know how many homes are gonna be until we see a site plan, and we see the environmental study, and we see the traffic study, and we're all gonna have input into that. And there's gonna be public hearings just like this, to just focus on those things: density, storm sewer, traffic, and and if it's in our jurisdiction, we're gonna be looking at traffic not only in the proposed development, we're gonna be looking at traffic on Fairgrounds, we're gonna be looking at traffic on Trayvine, we're gonna see how that impacts the other. The traffic study could come back and require the applicant to put a turn lane on Trayvine, or a turn lane on the fairgrounds. We don't know without the traffic impact stuff.
Ms. Wallace?
Just wanted to talk a little bit about PUDs and things. I was on the Beavercreek City Zoning Board, I was on the Beavercreek City Planning Commission, and then, of course, I was on for 8 years for City Council. And one of the best things that we have at our use right now is a PUD. A PUD means a plan unit development that we can, and you will have input on, up to, we can go with street lighting and how much, what the volume of street lights are in a PUD. We have control over everything. Once these studies come back that have the impacts, the traffic impact, the density, all those things will come back. He has to bring a site plan, Mr. McIntyre has to bring a specific site plan to put where bushes and trees go. And we bring it back to you all, and we communicate again with this. So a PUD is the best controlling mechanism that we have to create a neighborhood that would be to everyone's liking. R1AA just allows them to build homes, 1 acre homes, whatever. They could be of any kind of structure, they can have any kind of sewer system, anything. But a PUD is a planned development, just like Stonehill, where you exactly put where the streets go, where the trees go, where the lights go. So that's gonna be our best control factor in creating an environment for all of you that will be peaceful and harmonious for all the neighborhoods. That's the best I can tell you.
I'm going to read just a quick excerpt from the Greene County Engineer's letter to the trustees, and the section essentially, it's a short letter, but it says, "We understand the concerns of citizens and some Beavercreek Township officials regarding the potential new development and support whatever decision the trustees make on this case. There have been some questions of what happens if the township votes no. A no vote by Beavercreek Township on the proposed residential development removes it from the jurisdiction of Greene County and Beavercreek Township and does not stop the development or make the parcel no longer an option for development. If the trustees disapprove the rezoning, most likely the developer will go to the city of Beavercreek for annexation and approval. The city typically allows even more lots with their density than the township and the county and the township, and you as residents of the township will have no say on the development when it occurs inside the city of Beavercreek, as ultimately it will be the decision of City of Beavercreek boards and council. If annexed into the city, there are no legal requirements that the engineer is aware of that would require the city to require a traffic impact study for county or township roads, or require needed improvements to township or county roads for the development based on a traffic impact study, or require anything else requested by the township or county. That's directly from the county engineer, and that's her letter. That's public information. It was dated July 8th, 2021 for this zoning case 821. So I guess just between the trustees, can, Mr. Frick, is it okay to discuss conditions that we might want to add to this at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's what.
So I'd like to consider, the board to consider adding a condition that we, of no more than 100 homes. That we approve it with the conditions that are proposed, but we add a condition that there be no more than 100 single-family homes.
I would agree to that.
I would agree with that.
But I'd also like a different ingress and egress option.
He meets,
at all
yes,
possible.
the two access points already meets the minimum requirements of fire prevention, is that right, Mr. Grogan? And so to add a third to that, I don't know that we have that within our, we can certainly make it a condition, I suppose, but if you make a condition that requires him to buy land from someone else, I don't know that that condition holds water in court. I'm just asking the attorney, because if you put that on me, I would sue you.
At least
I don't like to make,
explore,
I don't like to put a condition or make a rule that cannot be enforced. That's my concern.
You can definitely make it, I'm sorry, but you can definitely make a condition to explore the option.
Okay.
But you cannot, if you make it a condition.
Stipulate is different than
Yeah, if you
explore.
stipulate, then, and if it can't be done, then, you know, then there's other recourses at that point.
ultimately, you're gonna the market's gonna determine what you would build there.
Correct.
And not us, not your neighbors, not you, at the end of the day. You might decide your house, but the market will determine what you build. I've always said that there's a distinct difference between the city of Beavercreek and the unincorporated portion, what we call Beavercreek Township, but we're all the township. It's just, we have an unincorporated portion. And what makes us different also makes us great in both ways. So the city has some things that the township doesn't offer as far as amenities and commercial amenities and retail and restaurants and everything else. But there are reasons why the unincorporated portion of Beavercreek Township is one of the fastest growing communities, and it's because of people want to build their homes here. So the market will determine what you build, and you'll determine, and you'll sleep at night however you sleep, as far as if you decide to stay the course with the township and work with us as you have, and we greatly appreciate that because you didn't have to. And others haven't, and others have not been as amenable as you have. So we do appreciate that. So that's a condition I would propose. If you want to add yours, that's as far as the exploring, I would support that. I'd be cautious about stipulating something we cannot force them to do. But it's your opinion. So I don't know what your thoughts are. Is there any condition that you would want to add?
Those two, the 100 homes and
explore.
And explore another egress besides the 22-foot and 27-foot roads.
You used to live back there. I mean, it is tight back in Stonehill Village, you know, and all those roads are, you know, it's a lot to take on.
Well, they are public streets. So when I lived in your community, people complained about people parking on the streets, and the answer was they're public streets. If you want a private street, move to Country Club of the North, because you can't park on the street there. They chose that path. So these are public streets, so people can park on those streets. If the fire truck can't get through, that's why they have the big chrome bumper on the front of them. And so they will use it if they have to get through. Which one? Stonehill is a PUD, absolutely. It's a master plan PUD. Country Club of the North, we won't go there tonight. So, they're good people too. So at the end of the day, you know, it's interesting because there's this term called NIMBY, you know, not in my backyard, and everyone here is in each other's backyard, and so, you know, where are the other 54,000 people of Beavercreek? They don't really care about this because it's not in their backyard. So people at Country Club of the North or on the south side, they're not here tonight. So it's your neighbors and your neighbor. So if you can figure out a way to cohabitate, I think we're all better off. There's also, the farm is for sale. My understanding that the farm has not been sold yet. You have an agreement reached, tentative agreement with the wetlands, but there's roughly 550 to 600 homes on the ground in Stonehill Village. There's probably another 100 wrapped around it. Each of you put in $2,500 and you can buy his farm. If you like the view, buy it. I mean, that's what we say in this business. And that was actually done in Yellow Springs. So they stopped a development. They pooled their money. They bought the farm, and they stopped it. Not everyone has the resources to do that, and not everyone cares as much to do that. They care about what's important to them. So we get it. But I think that's I would propose then that we add the condition, and Ms. Frick, how we word that, how we wordsmith that. I guess I would not to exceed 100 single-family homes.
I mean, if that's what the board is going for, I think we can do that.
Okay. And then secondly, to explore the possibility of a third ingress-egress, full access ingress-egress, because if it's a limited access, it really doesn't serve the purpose. It becomes a construction entrance. You have a 20-foot wide easement now, is that correct?
I think it's 15 for a little bit and then 60 for the expectation that we're gonna have a road.
Okay.
We have a 15-foot bottleneck.
15-foot bottleneck, okay. And so, and the 15-foot bottleneck is near your property? Okay. And the two of you can't get together and sell 25 more feet for a lot of money?
It's not, I'm not quite sure what he's referring to. I'm
Okay.
on that private
Okay.
lane, but I don't
Okay.
believe that, are you referring to the access from?
From Ankeny?
Yeah,
Right.
that's not me.
Okay. Okay. So if we can, do we want to type that up, write that up, so we can add that as a condition? Is there anything else that we would want to add or comment to? Sure.
Yeah, good question.
Absolutely.
If we get that other entrance, what happens to that 100-foot or 100-home requirement?
It would still be on there. As a condition. So. The question was, in the event that the applicant was successful in securing additional land to satisfy a third full access ingress egress, would the 100 the restriction, essentially the limitation of 100 homes, be reconsidered? And the answer was that the way that we've discussed this tonight, it would be limited to 100. Ms. Frick, I'll ask you, is there anything that would prevent a future board from revisiting that and modifying that restriction?
I was gonna say, it's,
Be a
I mean,
major
they could
modification to
legislate through a major modification, but
Modify
a major
PUD.
modification would have to essentially come back to
Zoning and then you.
zoning and then you all, so it would be similar to this.
Right, be another public hearing.
So
Through the
the,
zoning commission and through the trustees.
so yeah, so
two
if,
public hearings and you could do it.
if they did secure another egress and egress and the applicant came in with a site plan of over 100 homes, that would be considered a major modification. That would go to the zoning commission for recommendation to the township trustees.
What if it was 120?
That would still have,
Just
because
still go.
the legislation is 100, no more than 100 homes.
Just making sure
So,
we're clear.
it's a major modification at that point, but the only thing you're considering at that point is the change. We just went through one a couple weeks ago
Right.
on a modification. So, a major modification has to go to the Board of Township Trustees, public hearings.
It does happen.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Yeah,
But it's
we just did a major modification.
not in your backyard.
Yeah. We just
Not
did a
being
major
facetious, it
modification,
was
so that's the
south
process
side.
it has to go to. And it was a density.
It was a density, but it was also, the roads reconfigured, the stormwater was reconfigured and redesigned.
So it could change, but the applicant would have to go through that process again.
And the public would get another hearing, get two hearings out of it.
It would be a zoning commission hearing, and then a recommendation to the Board of Township Trustees, and then a public hearing for the trustees to take it into consideration. And then whatever the decision was made by the board, that would be the legislation for the modification, which could be denial.
Okay. At that point, but he would still have the 100 homes.
Correct.
It is not, the only thing he's obligated to is to explore, because we can't stipulate that he buys someone else's land. Okay? So language-wise, should we have a resolution that we want to modify?
We have to,
Number one, we have to vote to
Yeah.
reject the recommendation of the zoning commission.
correct.
And approve the application with following conditions.
Okay. And do we want to wordsmith those two conditions, or have you already done
Well,
this?
my question is, in regards, staff has recommended several other recommendations and conditions that staff's recommending.
These would be on top.
On top of
Okay,
those.
I just wanna make sure.
In addition.
They had 5, I think.
It would be a total of 7
There's 5.
conditions.
Yeah,
Plus 2.
okay.
Well, I assume that you kind of already did, but so, adding a condition, that, development,
Not to exceed 100 single-family homes. But no stipulation is, we're not stipulating lot size. We're strictly stipulating the number of structures.
that one's pretty simple. The other one, as far as to explore a third,
To me, it's a good faith request. I don't know how you put that
well,
as a
I mean,
condition, because how do you
I guess
prove
that's
it?
that's what you all need to determine is exactly what you mean by that. to explore, because keep in mind that this might be another board or somebody else that's looking at that in the future, and what the intent on that is. Are you asking the applicant to provide
Well, if you can't,
staff
yeah.
some information evidencing that? Are you, I mean, I don't know.
To me, that's, Max, you have a
May I
question?
offer a suggestion that we involve the Greene County engineer in this suggestion, that it somehow involves her, a report or a recommendation from her on the feasibility of a third entrance point?
It would anyway with your traffic impact study.
Right.
It would already be part of that.
I see what you're saying. That's the only way I could think to.
So maybe we just leave it at the traffic impact study, because if traffic impact just stipulates it, if traffic impact comes back and says without the third access, even if he found one, why would he buy one?
Well, under that condition, you could say a traffic impact study which is then approved by the Greene County engineer and considers the option of a third ingress egress or something along those lines. Just add that to it.
I feel like we're tying a knot around something we can't hold on to.
I like that though. I want something in there about an egress. I don't want another option. I like what she's stated.
It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like saying that it's not to be unreasonably withheld. Define unreasonable.
Yes. I mean, I get your point, but, you know,
Want to say yours again? Essentially, the traffic impact study considers.
The traffic impact study which has been approved by the Greene County engineer and considers
third.
a third.
The necessity of, or considers the third full access.
if they do the traffic I mean, they can look at that, you know, but I want them to actually like focus on that as well, like when they're doing that impact study, that, you know, the areas are not or are going to support the traffic. flow
Those
that
roads can't support.
need another access.
If you want to print it, if you can, Don, and then we'll take it from there. There's too thick. You can bear with us just a few more minutes.
Hey, you can't do that. I want to do that too.
Matt? Oh, sorry, I'll do it. I was just trying to lay it back.
I told him, I said, you can't do that. I got to do that too. Don't curse it.
All the I's dotted and T's crossed. That's what I think. I've learned a lot about annexation. I think there's a lot more I don't. Yeah. Let's say no development is ever done. The wetlands are fine. You don't have to have development to protect the wetlands. There's nothing done.
Jessica came by, stayed for a week here. She came down and I
made things difficult.
Because she was on her way, she's going from Keesler to DC.
Sorry, I made things
She's now aide to the vice chief. Did she catch it? I didn't know if you knew or not. Well, we've had an earful for the last couple of weeks because the former aide and her two type A personalities banging on each other's heads. Well, they finally got it all together. The other old aide left. She's in charge. And she's happy. Just amazing what she's doing. So far, so good. I didn't know if you knew that.
She asked me what kind of job she should tell her boss that she wants after spending 3 years. And I said, if you're asked, first off, you don't go in and tell them. But if you're asked, you say, I'll go wherever the Air Force needs me.
Yeah, good answer.
That's the way you answer those questions. Don't try to tell them something because you're not smart enough.
Excuse us. Okay. All right. So we had a chance to read the draft?
Yes.
Namely number 4 and the modification to number 2A and 2B. All right. At this point, do we have a motion?
I move to reject the recommendation of the zoning commission and approve the zoning application case 821 with the following conditions. Number 1, allow the 58-acre area which is to be placed under conservation by the Beavercreek Wetlands Association to be counted towards the open space requirements for the proposed PUD. Number 2, any specific site plan submitted for this RPUD must include the following information. A, proof of communication with the Greene County Floodplain Administrator and a detailed summary of techniques which will be employed when developing in or near the floodplain. B, a traffic impact study which has been approved by the Greene County Engineer, ZC case number 82113 of 48, which considers the feasibility of a third egress into the development. C, proof of communication with the holders of easements for overhead electric lines, noting how the configuration of the neighborhood takes such easements into consideration. Such configuration shall be reviewed and approved by any agencies deemed applicable by the Community Development and Risk Department. D, an environmental impact study determining the existence of any endangered species or their habitats on the parcel, and a detailed summary of techniques which will be employed when developing the site, such that it conforms to all laws and regulations pertaining to the existence of endangered species of their habitats. E, a detailed summary of site development techniques which will be employed to minimize impact on the wetlands and wooded areas on or near the parcel, to be reviewed and approved by an agencies deemed applicable by the Community Development and Risk Department. Number 3, any site plan submitted for this RPUD will be subject to the approval of any agency or entity with jurisdiction or authority over any aspect of the proposed development, or to any other entity at the discretion of the Community Development and Risk ZC case. Number 4, any site plan submitted for this RPUD shall not exceed 100 single-family homes. Any site plan submitted which exceeds 100 single-family homes shall be considered a major modification.
Second.
Board, I want to clarify one thing. Where it said in the motion under B, where it was read, zoning case number 821, 14 of 48, that was a cut and paste on my fault. So that's the footer. So just take that out, but it will read the same as it does. That's just cut
Do we
and
need
paste.
to modify the motion?
Just want to make it clear that case number 821, page 14 of 48 is not part of the
Okay.
motion.
So make sure we don't need to modify it.
Yeah, that's my fault in the cut and paste.
Mr. McIntyre, thank you for the process you've been through. Sometimes it's not always pleasant, but we appreciate what you try to do. Thanks to everybody that came out tonight and that attended the zoning hearings. It's phenomenal that you came out and that you expressed your opinions, and we appreciate that. To staff, thank you for your work. It's not always fun to be in the seats that you sit in, because you cannot please the whole world and your mother-in-law at the same time. So, Mr. Rushing, if you can call.
Trustee Walsh motion, seconded by Trustee Dean. Trustee Walsh?
Yes.
Trustee Dean?
Yes.
Trustee Crutch?
Yes.
I hope
Anything else to come before the board? If not, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Dean?
Yes.
Trustee
Be around
Walsh?
the rest of the week.
Trustee Crutch?
Yes.